I'm next in line, and I can instinctively feel my jaw clench. Now, I've already been stopped and searched once on this trip home, and I only have this beard because my favorite hockey players are growing them until they get eliminated from the playoffs. And I chose Dulles. Why the hell did I choose Dulles? I have not once been able to walk out of the soul-crushing confines of Dulles without being pulled over into that little extra search room. Let me back up. My mom had just had a 5-day work trip in Geneva, Switzerland, and like so many times before, my dad and I bummed along. This was our first family trip in 6 years to somewhere other than India, which is to say that this is the first family trip that wouldn't be fraught with the drama of a soap opera. No cheek pinching, no family tension, no comments about how big my butt has gotten in the past year. No, this long weekend would just be about chocolate and cheese and beautiful Lake Geneva. Now, a lot had changed in those 6 years. I had graduated from high school and then college. I had explored the US and Europe on my own, and most importantly, I had gained very important perspective on my parents' parenting and on their relationship, and like any good young adult, I knew exactly what they had done wrong. And I knew exactly who had won every argument. The one that came up the most was about how they presented themselves and ostensibly how I presented myself to others. This is something that they learned when they first came to the US. Now, my mom, she would always tell me, Ja, which is her nickname for me, Ja, if you don't know something, don't show anyone. If you need help, first, do your homework. Because when my mom came to the US, she was pulled out of the boiling hot stew of being in a giant family living on top of one another and plunged into the ice bath of being the first person, let alone the first woman in her family, to leave India. She reacted by becoming as self-sufficient as possible. So, for instance, on her first night in her dorm room, without a comforter, when she found it to be as cold as the New England winter outside, she didn't look for help to figure out how to close the window. She slept in her crappy winter jacket. Now, my dad, on the other hand, he would say, "Yenna teri marda, you know what, man? In this country, you don't get anything unless you ask for it." Because when my dad came to the US, he was overcome by a level of freedom and opportunity that he hadn't found in 33 years in the US and a year in Paris. In fact, he was crippled by it. So, for instance, the first time he had to go out and get groceries by himself, he barely knew the names of the 3 items that he needed, let alone how to choose between the seemingly endless options of bread. Now, as I grew up, I became more like my mom. Every time my dad would tell a terrible joke that would just go over the head of some unsuspecting JCPenney sales associate, I would feel reaffirmed in the idea that you shouldn't open your mouth unless you know what you're talking about, Dad. So instead, I spent hours learning how to argue a play-at-home plate, or learn to interpret the terms and conditions of a mail-in rebate offer, or how to enunciate every single word in Pizza Hut's menu. It was a way to protect my pride, to save face, but most of all, it was so that I wouldn't be mistaken as anything other than American. It was my way of assimilating. Now, these different approaches were as obvious as ever from the moment we touched down in Geneva. When I consulted my carefully curated list of restaurant and offbeat sightseeing recommendations, my dad just saunters up to the hotel staff and says, "You know what? We have never been here before." Where do the tourists go? And what's worse is at breakfast, we go to this beautiful patisserie nearby, And my dad insists on counting his change in excruciatingly exaggerated French. Guys, it sounded like Pepe Le Pew and Inspector Clouseau had a dumb Indian kid. Before we went to Switzerland, I was super excited to try the Swiss specialty of raclette. Now, raclette is potatoes and cheese and pickles and delicious. But I was bummed out to find out that we had come during the wrong time of year for raclette. That disappointment quickly turned to frustration when my dad insisted on asking everyone, from the barista to the museum tour guide to the random woman working behind the cosmetics counter at a department store, where do we find this raclette? Do you know raclette? Guys, I didn't want to come off as this daft, unsophisticated, stereotypical American, or worse, Indian tourist. I wanted to quietly blend in and experience the city as a knowledgeable insider. But on my trip home, I had a row to myself, and I had some time to think and reflect on our trip and my parents' conflicting ideologies. Thanks to my dad, we had been treated so well at the hotel that they gave us a box of specialty chocolates on our checkout. And they loved us. They treated us so warmly at the patisserie because my dad made a genuine effort to speak French. And best of all, thanks to my dad's persistence, I got to try that raclette, and let me tell you, it's as cheesy and delicious as it looks online. My dad had made a human connection that I always dreamed of making as a traveler, but I just never could. And so I thought to myself, why do I take myself so seriously? Why am I so rigid about my ways? At the end of our flight attendant, very stern-looking woman, walks by to pick up the trash, and she vigorously gestures for me to take my headphones out. I get really nervous, but when she unpurses her lips, she smiles. And she says to me, I just wanted to tell you that your father is a very sweet man. Now, I am shocked. At the airport, I rushed to ask my parents, Dad, what did you say to this woman? Well, they mixed up our reservation, so we didn't get the extra legroom we'd requested. When I asked her about it, she said, I'm sorry, sir, there is nothing I can do. And I said, okay, you're not the one who made the mistake. Later, when I went to go get some free chocolates, she thanked me for treating her like a human being and not yelling at her. We ended up talking about her children. As I stepped up in that customs line, I uncharacteristically relaxed and thought about my dad's human connections. As the customs officer began to rifle through my belongings, the first thing that he saw was my hockey jersey. And so without thinking, I pointed to it, and then to my playoff beard, and said to an officer of the law, man, I am growing this for the whitest reason possible. Unperturbed, the customs officer began to dig through my bag. But he did flash a smile. Thank you.
The world is yours. The world is yours.